The Jones? Yeah. They got moose in there. They got them at the market by Gander. No, that big market. That's up to y'all. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in ma ba'du. Tonight is the second class from Kitab al-Jami'. The section warning against bad manners and bad adab. And the last hadith was the hadith on hasad, jealousy and envy. In this hadith, in this whole section, these are hadith teachers the behavior pattern or the behavior, how a Muslim is supposed to carry him or herself, what we're supposed to stay away from and what we're supposed to do. This section are the things we're supposed to stay away from. So the first one was hasad, envying each other, except in two cases that is permissible, allowed, that a person is allowed, if we use the word envy, to envy another Muslim, right? 2 times that we excuse, and we have the allowance. We're allowed to envy one another. What are the 2 times? A person knows Quran. Huh?
The one that teaches Quran. Right? Recites this.
Shit.
They recite, but they pray. He can pray like one who knows the Quran and recite and praise.
Tayyib.
And the one that has wealth and springs in the cause of Allah.
No, we're still on the first one.
Oh.
The first one.
The one who knows Quran and recites it every day.
That's the hadith. This is the one to be envious. The person can know Quran and not implement it, not use it. The hadith, that you're envious of the person that Allah gave them the Quran. They memorize the Quran and they stand and pray with it during the day and during the night. They're using it. We don't want to just have a bunch of information and then it could be a proof against us on the day of judgment. So that was the first person or the first situation where Islamically we're allowed to envy. And that envy is not an envy where we want that person that we're looking at to forget the Quran, or we don't want them to pray during the day and the night, but we just wish that Allah give us something from the Quran so that we could stand and pray like them during the day and the night time. The second time that was allowed to be envious of one another. Huh? Wealth and they spend it. Now I just have wealth. A person can have wealth, right, and use it for the haram, right? But a person has wealth and they spend day and night. They're spending them was pleasing to Allah Jalla wa Ala. Those are the 2 times that we have been allowed to look at a person, and not that we wish for that to be taken away from them, but we wish that Allah give us whatever they have in that case from the Quran or from money or wealth, so that we could do what they're doing from khair, from good, from obedience to Allah Jalla wa Ala. Tayyib. This next hadith is also on the authority of Abu Hurairah. Wa anhu. It just says wa anhu. So we had it, bro. Okay. Oh, here we go. Can you find that real quick, eh? The chapter of bad manners or something like that. Wa anhu. وعن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ليس الشديد بالسرعة إنما الشديد الذي يملك نفسه عند الغضب متفق عليه. Also, Hadith is also agreed upon, meaning who agreed on it? Bukhari and Muslim, right? Which means that hadith is what, in lamest terms? More than that. We could just say the Bukhari was authentic. If we just said Muslim, it's authentic. If Bukhari ain't Muslim, huh? It's top tier. There you go. Raises authenticity is good. This is the top tier authenticity of a hadith. This is strong, super strong, right? And the Prophet ﷺ is teaching us in this hadith. He says, the strong person is not the one when it comes to the physical, wrestling people and throwing people around, right? Because when we think about somebody being strong, we think about the physical. Who can lift more? Who can lift more? Who can? Yes. It says the strong man is not the good wrestler. The strong man is not the good wrestler. طيب. ليس الشديد بالسرعة is not the one who can wrestle and throw people around and that they're physically able to overpower everybody. He said, وَإِنَّمَا الشَّدِيدُ الَّذِي يَمْلِكُ نَفْسَهُ عِنْدَ الْغَضَبِ. But the strong person is the person who's able to control themselves. They can control themselves when they get angry. Right? When they can control themselves when they get angry. Ayo. طيب. And the hadith is recorded in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. طيب. Islamically, as Muslims, are Muslims allowed to get angry? Yes. Anger is an emotion that human beings are created with. We're not saying people can't get angry. We're saying Muslims don't get mad, right? The hadith is talking about what do we do when we get mad? Now the issue is, as a Muslim, when somebody steps out of line, right? They violate, as we say. They out of line, right? They didn't cross the line. How does the Muslim respond? The Muslim, not what we've been taught in the street and not what we learned in the street, y'all. Right? We already know what we do in the street. What we do in the street, as the Sheikh said in the khutbah the other day, that could take us to hell. What we learned in the street could take us directly to the hellfire. Right? So what we learned in the street, when it goes against what we learned in the Quran and the Sunnah, we have to leave that what we learned in the street. In the street, what we do? If somebody violates, we got to do what? Huh? We got to put hands on them. We got to do this. We got to, in the street, we got to make sure that there's no way that can happen again. Right? Islam teaches us to control our anger because there's people sitting and they never coming home because of this. It only take one. Right? Not controlling our anger, and it leaves one thing, and it only takes a second, right? He says, the Prophet ﷺ said that the strong person is the one that they can control themselves when they get angry, when that emotion comes up, whether it's with a person you don't know in the street, whether it's with your wife with a husband, with children with parents, whether the person you're talking to is a Muslim or they're not a Muslim. That when the situation arises, that a person is able to control themselves. He said, why? Because a person, generally, al-ghadab, anger, that emotion is something that happened. We human. We're not robots. Something happens. So he says now, the person wants revenge on the person that just made him upset. Somebody did something, so now the anger is boiling. So now we want revenge, right? Which is normal. It's not like Islam doesn't recognize that. So we don't think that Islam is, it's not spaced out like Muslims can't get mad or Muslims not supposed to get mad. No, Muslims get mad. Muslims get upset. Muslims lose their temper, just like any other human being. But Islam teaches us how to control the temper and where to go from there. And that's what this hadith is for. He says, the person who's able to control themselves when the thing happens, whatever it was, when that event happens, the one who controls themselves when it happens, this is the person in Islam that's considered to be strong. This is the person that has strength. in front of Allah Jalla wa Ala. Not the person who could bench however much you can bench, or you could squat however much you could squat. But when something happened, you're emotional. Yeah. When something happens, that's my man. When something happens, you're emotional, and then you can't control yourself, and then one thing leads to the next. And then we do something that we can't take back. We do something that we can't take back. طيب. He says, Al-Ghadab, anger is broken into two categories. Anger is broken down into two categories. The first category, إذا كان الغضب لله عز وجل والحرمات ولحرماته فهذا غضب محمود. It's a praiseworthy time that a person is upset, right? And the praiseworthy time, when this is something good, it's something looked at as something respectful and honorable, is when the haram is being done. Somebody's doing something that Islam does not accept. That don't mean you put your hands on them. But what does a person feel in their heart? They might feel angry that somebody's doing something that's haram. And they can see it. They're doing it right out in the front of everybody, right? And they might feel anger. And the person doing it might be Muslim, and they might not be Muslim, right? It could be a Muslim doing it, and it might not be a Muslim doing it. Either way, that the Muslim feels anger. Why? Because the limits that Allah set in the Quran and that are set in the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, those limits are being violated, right? So when those limits are violated and the person gets upset, right? This is good. This is khair. As the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to get upset. He used to get angry. يَغْضِبْ إِذَا انْتُكِحَتْ حُرُمَاتِ اللَّهِ. That if the limits that Allah set, if somebody went over the limits, did the haram, went over the limits, that they will anger the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And this should anger us. And if we think about ourselves, if somebody do something in front of us, haram, some of us, because Allah tested us in the time we live in. Somebody can do the haram in front of us, not in front of just us, in front of the world. And we'll hit like. We'll like it, right? Or we might even share it to the rest of the world. So whoever didn't see it, whoever didn't see the haram, right? That's on my list of friends. They didn't see it. I'll share it so that all of them see it. All of those people could see it. It might have been restricted, for example. It might have been restricted to 300 people that saw it. Right, but I got 1,000 more people I want to see the same thing. So I share it over to 1,000 more people to see the limits of Allah being violated, which is a mistake. Right? This is a mistake. Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, most of the time, when you get upset, sometimes you tie your camera because you don't know how to disbelieve or the belief toward them how they're going to act. If you give them doubt, if you're trying to give them doubt, most of the time they don't want to hear that. So when they're angry, you jump. You have to tie your camera, you can move back, or you can tell them, brother, go make 2 rock out.
Right. There's ways good. There's ways to calm the anger down. And understand that this hadith is not saying that the Muslims ought to be walked all over and disrespected. That's not the point. The point is, we're human. We live in life every day. We come across situations every day. And things happen. How does the Muslim react when somebody makes them angry? That's the point. طيب. So this is the first category. The first category is that a person is angry because the limits of Allah have been violated. In this case, this anger doesn't mean we got the green light. It doesn't give us the green light to be disrespectful, to be rude, to be out of line, to put our hands on somebody and hurt somebody. It doesn't give us that green light. But it does give us the green light that at least in our hearts, it angers me to see somebody. You should be upset somebody's doing that. You should be upset when they come up on your feed and it's a Muslim on your feed disobeying the law in public and recording themselves. It shouldn't be funny, right? And we definitely shouldn't share it and show it to other people, because that's the fitna we living with now. Because the people, right? It's not just a display like we go on Instagram and whatever other. It ain't we just go on there and it's only Muslims looking, right? The whole world's looking, Muslims, non-Muslim. So now the deen is being judged by what we do, as usual. People who don't know, they don't read Quran, they don't read Sunnah. They judge Islam no matter how much you think you know or how much you think you don't know. They judge Islam on what they see from us. So if they see from us, right, chaos, and they judge Islam as being chaotic. They sound like that. I'm sorry for them. Yes. The first category of anger is that a person is angry because the limits set in the Quran and Sunnah have been violated and crossed. Somebody disobeys Allah, basically. Somebody is disobeying Allah, disobeying the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this upsets a person. Which again, it doesn't give them the green light to do what? Get physical with them, right? It doesn't give us the green light to physically harm somebody because they're disobeying Allah Jalla wa Ala. Tayyib. What does that look like? A person, Methalan, right now, it could be a person right now in Ramadan, a brother or a sister not fasting, and they don't have a reason not to be fasting, right? They're not fasting, and they don't have a reason, a valid Islamic reason, excuse not to be fasting, right? How we feel about that? This is a praiseworthy time to be mad. Like, you should be mad. How you ain't like, that should be a problem. We should have a problem with that. And they might tell you. Let's just assuming they told you, I ain't fasting today, man. I'm going to just say, well, why you ain't fasting? No, I missed Sahur, so I figure I'm going to just chalk this day because I can't be going all day without eating. Whatever, they tell you something, right? And you like, that should be it. No, I'm not saying y'all. I'm saying we hear that. We should feel a tight way about that. It shouldn't be just you shout out, man. No, that's the type of stuff because Allah's limits are being violated. Right? That's disobeying the law, right? That's your anger. Is not to the point that we're not able to help the person, advise the person, steer the person the right way, right? We gotta be balanced. Islam is balanced. Even if we angry, it don't mean you gotta talk crazy to the person in front of you. Doesn't mean you can't help them get back on the right track. Doesn't mean you can't steer them to what they're supposed to be doing. Doesn't mean you can't help them, but that should be something that builds that anger. This is the first category, and it could be fast, and it could be anything. A person not praying. A Muslim not praying. It's Ramadan, you're not praying, all the opportunity in the world, right? That should stir something in our hearts that, that's a violation, even in this time, which, again, that doesn't mean they can't be helped. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't want to help them. And even if a person does openly disobey Allah, it still doesn't mean we shouldn't want to help them. We should still want to help people. Because they openly disobey Allah doesn't mean that they don't want help. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't help them. Tayyib. The second category, either a person is being mad because the limits of Allah are being violated, or a person is being mad because you violated something that's personal to me, right? Something that's personal to us, which in most cases, that's our situation. We upset because somebody violated us and it has nothing to do with deen. Very rarely does it have to do with deen, right? Usually, it's something that we don't accept to be an acceptable behavior amongst us. So you standing in line, somebody just walk up in front of you and like they're going to go right before you. Like you're not standing there, right? Is that a violation? Well, that's cool. It's a violation. All right? That's going, you angry, you mad, like, yo, now it's about to be, right? Why? It had nothing to do with the limits of Allah. It got to do with me, personal, right? This is the second category, that a person, as he says, a person wants revenge for what just happened to him. Whatever just happened, they want revenge for it. They're ready to take revenge because they're angry. Tayyib. Does Islam allow revenge? Is revenge permissible in Islam? Tayyib. Abah Allah liman yusiu ilayhi an yaqtas. That Allah has allowed is permissible. Permissible is different. Permissible meaning it's allowed. It doesn't mean you have to. Abaha means something is allowed to do, but it doesn't have to be done. Right? Doesn't have to be done. Allah said, Qala ta'ala, وَجَزَاءُ سَيِّئَةٌ مِثْلُهَا. That the reward for something evil that was done to somebody is that something evil is done to them. Right? وَلَكِنَّهُ رَغَبَ فِي الْعَفْوِ. That even though revenge is allowed, and we're not even going to go into all of the rules connected to how far can you go for revenge and what we talking about revenge for what, we're keeping it real general, right? Keeping it real general. Because there are specific rules when you talk about getting revenge for something in Islam. Tayyib. Even though revenge is allowed in cases, At the same time, Islam and in the Quran, it promotes that we do what? Pardon and forgive people. That we are forgiving people. We forgive people. We forgive them after they did what to us? Huh? They wronged us. They did something out of pocket, right? They violated us. Even with that, and if we go to the extreme, Let's go all the way to the extreme and work our way back. The extreme is in the case of murder. In the case of murder, it's allowed Islamically. When you talk about murder, we're not talking about like street wars, y'all. We talking about real court system, Islamic countries. It's a whole government being run. It's a law system. We're not talking about random killings on the street. Somebody kills him, then you go kill them. We go back and forth. We're not talking about that. We're talking about that a Muslim is living in a Muslim country under Muslim law, and somebody kills, somebody's murdered, right? Somebody's murdered. There's a court process. They have to go to court. They're judges. They go to court. Let's say the judge sentenced the person to death because they killed somebody. So now the murderer gets sentenced to death. Everybody with me? Right? It's possible that the family steps in and pardons a person. The family could step in and pardon the killer, the murderer. Forgiving. That Islam promotes and pushes that we forgive. Right? It's a promotion in Islam that we forgive people. It doesn't mean that a person has to, because I knew people personally whose son was killed and the murderer was sentenced to death. So they have a thing in Saudi when if they want you to forgive them, they got like certain, I don't even know what it's like certain customs they do when they're seeking the forgiveness from people. So the brother told me that the family, their son was killed, murdered. So the family of the murderer, their whole family, like I don't even know how many of them was. They all came to their house outside on the front of their house on the street, like filled the whole street up. And part of the thing is when they want you to forgive them, the Saudis, they wear the ghutara, the red john with the black thing, with the black, the scarf they wear with the black. Part of their thing in their culture, if they want you to really forgive them, like serious, like this is serious to them. If they really serious about asking you to forgive them, they take that off and drop it on the ground in front of you. Right? They take it off. That's big in their culture. It might not mean nothing to us, but in their culture, that's a big thing. A couple people did that to me. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what it meant. It was something. He did something. So I'm like, nah, so he threw his kufi on. Threw his kufi down like tekfa teacher. Tekfa. I didn't know what it meant. So I'm like, yo, you throwing stuff, and now you really out of line. You throwing stuff at me. I didn't know what he was doing because I didn't know what it meant. But in their culture, that's a big thing. So basically to them, if they do that in front of you, and it wasn't just one person, it was his whole family of the murderer. Basically, if they do that, you're supposed to be like, all right, khalas. You're supposed to let them slide. But in that case, the family didn't let them slide. They didn't let them slide, and they still carried out they didn't let them go, yes. Yes, this is the family of the murderer. The family of the murderer. He went to their family went to the boy who was murdered's house. Yeah, so the one who took it off, this is the family of the murderer. They're asking for forgiveness from their family. They wouldn't have murdered him, yeah. They wouldn't have. Yeah, they can go to the court and say, yeah, we don't want him to be killed. Yeah, it'll be another penalty, but it don't necessarily be death, because the penalty might be death. It might be death is the penalty. But the family can come in, speak on behalf, and intercede, and, yes.
He's the killer?
Yes. It's not his family, because the killer's in jail, right? So his family is coming to speak on behalf of. So the
family of the killer take off their.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So if I need you to forgive me for something, somebody's asking you to forgive me. That's how they do there. We might have something different. You go to another country, it might be something different. Whatever. It's not like that's the standard, but that's what they do there. So the point is, Islam encourages forgiveness. It's not like we can't forgive people, because to some of us, forgiving equals what in the street? Soft, weak. We're not living by them codes, though. We're not living by them codes. We're living by the Quran and the Sunnah. And this is something praiseworthy in the Quran and the Sunnah. And that's why Allah said in another verse in Surah Shura, ayah number 40. Allah said, فَمَنْ عَفَى وَأَصْلَحَ فَأَجْرُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ. That whoever forgives, they pardon somebody, and they correct the situation, their reward is with Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. We got to make a distinction between the street rules, right, and deen. We have to make a distinction. You got to call a spade, and eventually you have to make a decision. What are you going to live by? As they say, you live by the sword, you die by the sword, right? What you live by, more than likely you die on, right? Tayyib. What time are we doing tonight, y'all?
35.
35?
Going back a minute.
Tayyib. So yesterday was 34.
34, yeah. Let's go back like a minute.
Tayyib. Tayyib, he says after that, and this is as he says, وَقَدْ جَعَلْ عِلَاجِ غَضَبِ أَشْيَاء. It's different ways to as we say, suppress the anger. Different ways to control the anger. Different ways that we learn in the Quran and the Sunnah to control our anger. Does anybody know? Praying. Make wudu. Yes. Seek refuge in Allah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Now this is the question, y'all. And this is where Iman comes in. How strong is our faith? How strong of a believer am I really? That when something happens and I get angry, that I start using these ways in real life. When I get angry, how realistic is it that since I'm upset and there's something going on, how realistic is it that I stop myself and say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, with everything going on in front of me? How realistic is it? You're in the house, your wife make you mad, your husband got you upset. How realistic is it that we stop in the middle of the argument? We stop, right? Before we say something we can't take back, brothers. Before we take something we can't take back, brothers, like divorce. Can't just divorce her and then say I was mad. It doesn't count. It doesn't work like that, brothers, sisters. The question keeps coming. You just because you divorced her when you were angry doesn't mean it doesn't count. Okay? How realistic is it that when we're upset, arguing with your wife, she arguing with her husband, it's an argument, everybody's upset, we got to ask ourselves, how strong do I really believe that at that point I'm going to go stop and go make wudu? Right? That's a question for ourselves. How strong is my iman that I believe that's going to work? Right? And this is from the Prophet. This is from the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Everything that y'all mentioned, even though the Sheikh didn't mention it here, is a hadith mentioned by the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam about how to control anger. That if you're standing, that you're supposed to do what? You're upset, you're angry, you're standing up. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if you're standing up, to do what? Sit down. If you're standing up, sit down. Right? What if you're arguing, you're upset, and you're sitting down? Then you're supposed to lie down all the way. Iman. It takes Iman to implement those type of hadith. You got to really believe that the statement of the Prophet ﷺ is true and it's going to work. Right? You're upset. You're in the middle of an argument. You stop the argument and you go make wudu in the middle of an argument. Right? What's the benefit of wudu in the middle of an argument? What's the benefit of wudu? Huh? No doubt it's not. They might follow you to the bathroom. They might follow you to the bathroom when it's time to make wudu. Yes.
It's like anger, so it's heat. And that water cools down the heat.
Jade. That's real close. That's Jade.
Can you, I ain't hear what you
He said when you're angry. We say shake. I'm sorry. Your body generates heat, and the wudu is gonna cool the heat down. So it's wudu shake. The water is gonna cool the heat down, extinguishing the fire. Allahu Akbar. Jade. That's a nice one. That's close. That's a benefit. It's a benefit. Um, he says here, أنه إذا غضب يتوضأ أو يغتسل, that he makes wudu or make ghusl, right? Why? He says لأن الغضب من الشيطان, because anger is from the shaitan. Everybody follow me? Anger is from the shaitan, and the Prophet ﷺ told us something else is from the shaitan too. Anybody know? There's another hadith. It's real short. Being hasty, being in a rush, to do everything. The Prophet ﷺ said that's from the shaitan. That's from the devil. He says, لأن الغضب, anger is from the shaitan. والشيطان مخلوق من النار. And the shaitan is created from what? Fire. You're talking about making wudu when you get angry. I'm angry is heat, as we say. It's getting heated, right? You're going to make wudu to cool yourself down. Why? Because the anger is from the shaitan, and the shaitan is created from fire. And the fire is put out with water, right? So in that case, a person is angry that they go make wudu, they go make or a ghusl to calm themselves down. Tayyib. The Prophet ﷺ, in other hadith, showed us the different ways to control ourselves. The question is, y'all, this is the question for all of us personally as Muslims. How much iman do I have in my heart to believe? Because some of us might sit here and say to ourselves, man, that ain't gonna work for me. Some of us that sit here and think to ourselves, that's not gonna work for me. So what makes you special that the Prophet ﷺ, the advice of the Messenger ﷺ, doesn't work for you? Right? That's the question. We got to know how much iman do we have in our hearts that when these things come up, that we don't resort back to the code of the street. We Muslim, y'all. The code of the street is not the code we live by. And that's the last thing I say, because we got to make the call it in. What time is it?
It's 34. We got like 35 seconds. 30 seconds.
Oh, well, get ready. The last thing I'll say, we're Muslims. We live by the Quran and the Sunnah. We don't live by the code of the street. The code of the street is not our code. We have our own code, and that code is revelation. Whenever you're ready, call it. The code is revelation, the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Whatever we learned in the street, no matter how many people died behind it and how many people locked up behind it, when it goes against the Quran and the Sunnah, we don't follow that. We got to be strong enough as men to do that. Sallallahu alaihi wa barak nabiyina Muhammad.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.